With the Balrogs being one of the most fearsome and awesome creatures in all of Middle-earth's history, it's a common question that us fans often have. Was Durins Bane the last surviving Balrog? Are there any left in Middle-earth? Let's find out.
Build me a home worthy of Mordor.
So we will start by taking a brief look at the most commonly accepted history of the Balrogs. Of the Maiar, many were drawn to Melkor's splendour in the days of his greatness, and remained in that allegiance down into his darkness, and others he corrupted afterwards to his service with lies and treacherous gifts. Dreadful among these spirits were the Valeraukar, the scourges of fire that in Middle-earth were called the Balrogs, demons of terror. So as this quote states, the Balrogs were Maiar that took the form of fiery demons with hearts of fire and whips of flame. They originally dwelled in Utumno, a fortress of Melkor's, but when the fortress was destroyed by the Valar, they fled to the west and hid in the pits of Angband, awaiting the return of their master. It wasn't actually until Morgoth was threatened by Ungoliant that the Balrogs left their hiding place. It is said that they ran to the Lamnoth like a tempest of fire. With their whips they destroyed Ungoliant's webs and made her flee. They were actually used most heavily during the wars of Beleriand. Morgoth only came out of Angband on one occasion, and instead sent the Balrogs to lead his armies more often during wars. We know that two of them were killed during these battles, one by Glorfindel, and the other one was of course Gothmog, who was killed by Ecthelion. After the War of Wrath, some Balrogs escaped the destruction of Beleriand and hid deep underground, in inaccessible places at the roots of the earth. Only one Balrog appears after the defeat of Morgoth, and that is of course in the Third Age when the dwarves of Khazad-dûm unwittingly released the Balrog, afterwards known as Durins Bane. This was of course while mining for Mithril, and they were consequently driven out of Moria by the creature. It was of course later encountered by the Fellowship of the Ring and ultimately killed by Gandalf. So with that brief history of the named Balrogs out of the way, let's look at how many Balrogs were actually known to have existed in Middle-earth before we can attempt to figure out if there are any left. Now, I will warn you, you should be prepared for some pretty heavy contradicting statements during this. As with many issues in Tolkien's mythology, the answer to this question depends somewhat on which text we look at. Conventional wisdom holds that the correct answer is that there were only actually a handful of Balrogs to ever exist in Middle-earth. However, a closer analysis of the books shows that this idea was in fact developed much later on and is actually less firmly entrenched than people may think. And upon them rode the Balrogs in hundreds. And these were the most dire of all those monsters which Melkor devised against Gondolin. So from this quote here from The Fall of Gondolin, we can see that at least at one point in time, Tolkien stated that there were hundreds of Balrogs in existence. He had even noted at one point that there were thousands alive. There came wolves and wolf riders, and there came Balrogs 1,000, and there came worms and drakes and Glaurung, father of dragons. And then just to confuse things a little more, Christopher Tolkien also once wrote that his father left a note stating that there should not be supposed more than say 3 or at most 7 that ever existed. Now, I'm sure you can imagine my frustration when researching this topic to try and give you guys an accurate answer for this question. I of course don't want to end this video by saying that we simply don't know the answer, so my next idea and method I have decided to use was to figure out and count the number of Balrogs that are said to have been slain during any of the major battles written about in any of the main published books, rather than looking into Tolkien's notes and earlier writings. So here is what I discovered. Of those demons of power, Ecthelion slew 3, for the brightness of his sword cleft the iron of them, and did hurt to their fire, and they writhed. Yet of the leap of that axe Dramboleg, that was swung by the hand of Tuor, were they still more afraid, for it sang like the rush of eagle's wings in the air, and took death as it fell, and 5 of them went down before it. So in addition to the 8 named here, there was also Gothmog, who was of course killed by Ecthelion, and the one killed by Glorfindel. Then of course we have Durins Bane. So that brings the total that we know about to an absolute bare minimum of 11. Clearly far too many for the later figure of at most 7. There is also the fact that at some point in the Silmarillion it clearly states that Balrogs were destroyed, save some few that fled and hid themselves in caverns inaccessible at the roots of the earth. Now, if we take this line into consideration, then my personal opinion on the matter is that through the history of Middle-earth, hundreds, if not thousands of Balrogs definitely existed. And there are definitely some left over, deep underground, that are yet to be discovered. I would say that it's highly unlikely, throughout the entire world, that Durins Bane was the only Balrog that was left deep underground, undisturbed for so long. I would be almost certain that there are plenty more. Now, this is of course my take on the information that I have come across. If we look at it objectively, how many Balrogs were there? A case can be made for 3, for 7, for 35, hundreds, and even thousands, but it is clear that they remained numerous from the earliest days of the mythology through the writings of Lord of the Rings. So at the end of the day, the answer must actually remain uncertain, as even the last word cannot be precisely determined. This is one of the more contradictory topics in all of Tolkien's writings, but if you ask me, that's kind of what makes it so interesting. It's certainly fun to discuss and debate amongst fans. So let's talk. What do you guys think the real answer is to this question? Do you believe there are plenty of undisturbed fire demons living deep underground, hidden away from all existence? Or do you think that Durins Bane truly was the last of them? Let us know in the comments down below. Before we go, I would of course like to thank all of our amazing patrons, and an extra special shout out goes to the members of our highest tiers: Kevin, Abram, Matt, Nashith, Denver Steele, Gregory, John and Andrew. We cannot put into words how much we appreciate you guys. That's it from me today, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth content, and don't forget to check out our other channels. We've recently, in the last few months, launched The Batcave, which is a channel very similar to this, but purely based around Batman and DC characters. If you're interested in that, feel free to check it out and consider subscribing if you enjoy. Okay, thank you all again. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.